Colorado, 1887. The sun blazed mercilessly over Timber Creek, a town that had blossomed from a mining settlement into a respectable community with the arrival of the railroad 5 years prior. The train station, a wooden structure weathered by mountain winds, bustled with activity as the 215 from Denver pulled in with a screech of metal and a billowing cloud of steam. At the edge of the platform stood 11-year-old Abigail Thornton, her copper-colored braids catching the afternoon light as she scrutinized each female passenger descending from the train. Behind her, 25-year-old Keegan Turner shifted his weight from one boot to the other, his expression a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. "Abby," Keegan whispered, tugging at the brim of his Stetson, "you can't just pick out a new mother like you're choosing a calf at auction." The girl turned, her freckled face set with determination. "Pa said I could help decide. He trusts me." Keegan ran a hand through his sun-streaked brown hair, wondering how he'd found himself in this peculiar situation. As foreman of the Thornton Ranch, he'd expected to break horses, manage cowhands, and drive cattle, not escort his employer's headstrong daughter on her unusual mission. Abigail suddenly grabbed his sleeve. "That one," she whispered, pointing toward a young woman descending from the second-class car. Keegan's breath caught in his throat. The woman couldn't have been more than 22, with chestnut hair swept up beneath a modest hat. Her navy traveling dress, though simple, was well tailored to her slender frame. What struck him most was not her obvious beauty, but the careful way she surveyed her surroundings, cautious yet determined, like someone who had weathered storms but refused to be blown off course. "Miss," Abigail called out, breaking free from Keegan's side before he could stop her. "Miss, are you here for the housekeeper position?" The young woman turned, surprise registering on her face before a warm smile transformed her features. "I am. And you must be Miss Thornton?" "I'm Abigail. And that's Mr. Turner, our foreman." She pointed back at Keegan, who felt a flush creep up his neck as he approached, removing his hat. "Keegan Turner, ma'am. Pleasure to meet you." He extended his hand, noting the softness of her palm against his calloused one. "Beatrice Taylor," she replied, her voice carrying the faintest hint of an Eastern accent. "Though most call me B." What neither Keegan nor Abigail could possibly know was that Beatrice Taylor was a name chosen just 3 days ago, or that the letter of recommendation tucked in her handbag bore the signature of a woman who existed only in her imagination. The real Beatrice Taylor had secrets wrapped around her like the shawl protecting her shoulders from the mountain chill. Secrets that, if revealed, would shatter any chance of the fresh start she so desperately sought. Were there many other applicants? Bea asked, trying to mask her nervousness. Abigail shook her head. "Just 2 old ladies from Pueblo, but Pa said I could make the final choice. I decided to wait for today's train." Keegan cleared his throat. "Mr. Thornton did stipulate certain qualifications, Abby." He turned to Beatrice, suddenly conscious of his dusty clothes. "The position involves housekeeping, cooking, and, well, looking after me," Abigail interjected. "My mother died 4 years ago." Beatrice knelt to Abigail's level, her eyes soft with understanding. "I'm very sorry to hear that. I lost my mother when I was not much older than you." It wasn't a lie. One of the few truths Beatrice could freely share. "Do you know how to make apple dumplings?" Abigail asked, her expression serious. "With cinnamon or without?" "Both." Beatrice laughed, a genuine sound that made Keegan's chest tighten inexplicably. "Both it is, then." As they collected Beatrice's trunk, a surprisingly light affair for someone moving west permanently, Keegan couldn't shake the feeling that Miss Taylor wasn't exactly what she seemed. The way her eyes darted occasionally to scan the platform, the tense set of her shoulders that belied her easy smile. In his experience, people running towards something and people running from something often looked remarkably similar. "The buckboard's this way," he said, hoisting her trunk onto his shoulder. "Town's grown some, but not enough to warrant a proper hotel. Mr. Thornton arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Patterson until your references are confirmed and terms agreed upon." A flicker of alarm crossed Beatrice's face before she composed herself. "How thoughtful. And when might I meet Mr. Thornton?" "Tonight," Abigail announced proudly. "We're having you over for supper so Pa can see if I made a good choice." As they made their way through town, Beatrice took in the wooden boardwalks, the general store with its barrels of goods spilling onto the porch, the saloon with painted windows tactfully obscuring the activities within. Timber Creek was larger than she'd expected, but small enough to make hiding difficult if the wrong people came looking. "Miss Taylor," Keegan said as he helped her onto the buckboard, "if you don't mind my asking, what brings a lady like yourself to a place like Timber Creek? The advertisement ran in Denver and St. Louis papers, but you don't strike me as being from either place." Beatrice met his gaze steadily. "People come west for all sorts of reasons, Mr. Turner. Some seek fortune, others adventure." She adjusted her gloves. "I simply sought a change of scenery. And a position as a housekeeper to a widower and his daughter was the change you had in mind?" He didn't bother hiding his skepticism. "Honest work with good people is nothing to scoff at where I come from." "And where is that exactly?" Before she could answer, Abigail squeezed between them on the seat. "Do you know how to ride, Miss Taylor? Pa says a proper rancher's wife should know horses." Keegan nearly dropped the reins. "Abigail Thornton. Miss Taylor is interviewing for a housekeeper position, not—" He broke off, mortified. Beatrice's cheeks flushed pink. "I can ride, though it's been some time. And I believe your father is simply seeking household help, not a wife." Abigail's expression turned sly. "For now, but I have plans." Keegan groaned, snapping the reins to urge the horses forward. "Lord help us all." As the buckboard rolled out of town, none of them noticed the man who had stepped off the same train, his gaze following their departure with calculating interest. Mrs. Patterson's boarding house offered clean, if spare, accommodations. After settling Beatrice in, Keegan promised to return at 6 to escort her to the Thornton Ranch for supper. Alone in her room, Beatrice exhaled deeply, releasing the tension she'd carried since Denver. She extracted a folded newspaper from her handbag, smoothing the wrinkles from an advertisement circled in ink. "Housekeeper sought by established rancher. Good wages," inquired J. Thornton, Timber Creek, Colorado. Beneath the advertisement, she'd written the names of everyone she'd met so far. Intelligence had kept her alive these past months. Meticulous observation would do the same here. Keegan Turner, ranch foreman, protective of the Thorntons, observant, possibly suspicious. Abigail Thornton, clever, determined, clearly missing maternal influence. J. Thornton, unknown quantity, widower, successful rancher. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly tucked the paper away before opening it to find Mrs. Patterson, a stout woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Brought you some wash water, dearie. Figured you'd want to freshen up before meeting Mr. Thornton." The older woman set down a pitcher and basin. "That child's taken quite a shine to you already. She's a remarkable girl. That she is. Been running that household since she was 7. Poor thing." Mrs. Patterson lowered her voice. "After Elizabeth, that was her mother, passed, James nearly drank himself into an early grave. If not for that child and young Turner keeping things together, the Thornton spread might have been lost." Beatrice absorbed this information carefully. "Mr. Turner seems very dedicated to the family. Came west as a boy with nothing but grit and grew into one of the finest young men in the territory. James treats him like the son he never had." Mrs. Patterson paused, studying Beatrice. "Forgive my directness, Miss Taylor, but you seem awfully refined for someone seeking household work. Life takes unexpected turns, Mrs. Patterson." "That it does." The landlady nodded. "Well, whatever's brought you here, I hope you find what you're looking for." After Mrs. Patterson left, Beatrice unpacked her meager belongings, including a small revolver which she carefully concealed beneath her mattress. The weapon was a reminder of dangers past and possibly still present. She'd chosen Timber Creek for its remoteness, but experience had taught her that distance alone couldn't guarantee safety. At precisely 6 o'clock, Keegan arrived in a freshly brushed coat, his hair still damp from washing. The transformation from dusty cowhand to presentable escort wasn't lost on Beatrice, who had herself changed into her second-best dress, a forest green cotton with ivory trim that complemented her complexion. "You clean up admirably, Mr. Turner," she remarked as he helped her into the buggy. "As do you, Miss Taylor." His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than propriety strictly allowed. "Though I suspect you've never looked anything but proper a day in your life." If only he knew how many nights she'd spent sleeping rough, how many disguises she'd donned. Appearances can be deceiving. Indeed they can. He clicked to the horses. "Which is why I'm curious about those references you mentioned. Do you interrogate all your employer's potential staff, or am I receiving special attention? Keegan's lips quirked. Abigail has placed a great deal of faith in you, Miss Taylor. The Thorntons have suffered enough disappointment. His protective instinct touched her more than she cared to admit. I assure you, Mr. Turner, I have no intention of disappointing anyone. The Thornton ranch appeared as they crested a hill, a sprawling property with a two-story main house, several outbuildings, and pastures stretching toward distant mountains. A herd of cattle grazed in the valley below, while closer to the house, horses roamed in fenced paddocks. It's beautiful, Beatrice murmured. James built most of it himself after he married Elizabeth. Started with nothing but a claim and determination. Keegan guided the buggy toward the house. Whatever else he may be, he's a man who creates something lasting. The implication hung between them, that Beatrice might be the type to drift through, leaving nothing but disruption in her wake. Before she could respond, Abigail burst from the front door. You're here, she called, running to the buggy. She wore a blue dress clearly saved for special occasions, her copper hair tamed into a ribbon-bound ponytail. Pa's been pacing for an hour. James Thornton appeared in the doorway, and Beatrice understood immediately why his daughter was so eager to find him a wife. In his early 40s, he retained the robust build of a man who worked alongside his hands, with features weathered by sun and grief in equal measure. His dark beard was neatly trimmed, his clothing simple but well kept. He was handsome in the way of men who carried responsibility with dignity. Welcome to our home, Miss Taylor, he said, his voice deep and measured as he helped her down from the buggy. I hope my daughter hasn't overwhelmed you with her enthusiasm. Not at all, Mr. Thornton. She's been a delightful guide. Inside, the house reflected both prosperity and the absence of a woman's touch. The furniture was solid, the rooms clean but sparsely decorated. The dining room had been prepared with obvious care, the table set with the good china, wildflowers arranged in a chipped vase. Throughout dinner, Beatrice answered questions about her cooking abilities, her experience with household management, and her comfort with rural isolation. She wove truths into her fabricated background. Her mother had indeed taught her to cook, though in a Philadelphia townhouse rather than the fictional Minnesota farm she described. And your father's passing left you without family? James asked, his eyes sympathetic. Yes, Beatrice replied, the familiar pang of actual loss making her voice authentic. The farm was lost to taxes. I've been making my way west since, taking positions where I could. It takes courage to forge ahead alone, James observed. Colorado can be unforgiving, but it rewards perseverance. Keegan, who had remained mostly silent, studied her with an intensity that suggested he was cataloging inconsistencies in her story. When Abigail excused herself to fetch dessert, he leaned forward. You mentioned working for a family in Denver, Miss Taylor. Which one? The Harringtons, she replied smoothly. Their youngest daughter married last spring, reducing their household needs. Curious. I delivered horses to a Harrington in Denver last year. Banking family, if I recall. The very same. Beatrice maintained her composure, though inwardly she cursed her luck. Of course Keegan would have connections in Denver. Strange he never mentioned a housekeeper from the East. I believe Mr. Harrington had more pressing matters to discuss than household staff when purchasing horses, Mr. Turner. James chuckled. She has you there, Keegan. Now, enough interrogation. He turned to Beatrice. I appreciate your interest in the position, Miss Taylor. Abigail clearly approves, and her judgment in these matters carries weight with me. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her response. James excused himself, returning moments later with a grim expression. Miss Taylor, there's a man in town asking after a woman of your description. Claims to be a Pinkerton detective. The blood drained from Beatrice's face. Keegan noticed immediately, his suspicions visibly confirmed. I should return to Mrs. Patterson's, she said, rising shakily. Not if you're in trouble, James said quietly. Keegan can take you out the back way while I speak with this detective. The decision facing Beatrice crystallized in an instant. Flee again or trust these strangers with a truth that might endanger them all. Looking from James's concerned face to Keegan's guarded one, she made her choice. He's not a detective, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And if he finds me, I fear none of us will be safe. Beatrice's revelation hung in the air, transforming the comfortable dining room into a space charged with tension. James glanced toward the hallway where Abigail might return at any moment, then back to the woman whose composed exterior had cracked to reveal genuine fear. Keegan, take Miss Taylor to the old line shack. No one will look there. James's decisive tone left no room for argument. I'll handle our visitor. Keegan hesitated. James, if this brings trouble to your door, it's my door to defend. The rancher's hand rested briefly on Keegan's shoulder. Go. I'll send word when it's safe. As Keegan led Beatrice through the kitchen and out the back door, Abigail appeared with a berry pie, her eyes widening at the scene before her. What's happening? Where are you taking Miss Taylor? Beatrice knelt quickly before the girl. Your father needs to speak with someone in town. Mr. Turner is just taking me somewhere quiet for a little while. Is it because of the man at the station? The one who watched us leave? Abigail's observation stunned both adults. What man, Abby? Keegan asked sharply. Tall with a funny hat. He got off the train after Miss Taylor, but didn't collect any luggage. She frowned. He kept looking at her, not in a nice way. Beatrice's hands trembled as she squeezed Abigail's. You're very observant. That's an important quality. Are you in danger? The girl's directness was disarming. I hope not, especially now that I've met you. Beatrice managed a smile. Be good for your father, and I'll see you soon. The old line shack stood 3 miles from the main house, nestled against a ridge that protected it from winter winds. Once used by ranch hands monitoring the property's boundaries, it had been replaced by a newer structure closer to the western pastures. Basic but solid, it contained a bunk, table, stove, and necessary supplies. Keegan lit the oil lamp, illuminating the small space. It's not much, but it's secure. James keeps it stocked for emergencies. He gestured to a cupboard. There's food, water, and blankets. Beatrice stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself. I never intended to bring trouble to your employer's home. Yet here we are. Keegan's voice hardened. Who exactly is looking for you, Miss Taylor? Or is that even your name? She met his gaze directly. My name is Beatrice. The Taylor is borrowed. And the man who's tracking you. She sank onto the bunk, the weight of months on the run suddenly overwhelming. Victor Holloway. He works for my former fiancé's family. Keegan leaned against the door, his expression unreadable. Go on. I was engaged to Charles Montgomery of the Philadelphia Montgomerys. Banking, railroads, shipping, they have interests in everything. She twisted her hands in her lap. The engagement was arranged by my father to settle debts. I didn't object initially. Such arrangements are common in certain circles, until I discovered Charles's true nature, which is cruel, calculating. He's already driven one wife to her grave. Her voice dropped. The official report claimed consumption, but her maid told a different story, broken bones, bruises hidden beneath high collars. Keegan's jaw tightened. So you ran. The night before the wedding. I took nothing but a small inheritance from my mother and disappeared. She looked up at him, defiance replacing fear. I won't apologize for valuing my life. And this Holloway? What's his role? The Montgomerys' problem solver. Charles couldn't abide the humiliation of being jilted, so he sent Victor to bring me back, by any means necessary. She swallowed hard. 2 months ago in St. Louis, he nearly succeeded. I wasn't cautious enough. The memory of her narrow escape, running through rain-slicked alleys, hiding in a church cellar for 3 days, made her shudder. Why here? Why a housekeeper position? I needed somewhere remote, somewhere I could disappear. The advertisement mentioned a widower with a child. I thought. She trailed off. You thought a ready-made family would provide cover. Keegan's tone wasn't accusatory, merely thoughtful. Yes, selfish, perhaps, but I was desperate. She stood, facing him squarely. I understand if you think I should leave. Once this man reports back to Charles, he'll send more men. Keegan studied her for a long moment. James Thornton doesn't scare easily, Miss Taylor. Neither do I. He pushed away from the door. Rest. I'll keep watch tonight and return in the morning with news. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Mr. Turner? Thank you for not immediately assuming the worst of me. His expression softened momentarily. The worst would be returning to a man who treats women as property. No one deserves that fate. With that, he closed the door, leaving Beatrice alone with her thoughts and the soft hiss of the oil lamp. Outside, Keegan circled the cabin, checking sight lines and possible approaches. The moon illuminated the landscape enough to reveal any movement. Satisfied with the shack's defensibility, he settled on the porch, rifle across his lap. His mind replayed Beatrice's story, searching for inconsistencies but finding none. Her fear had been too genuine to fabricate. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent him to his feet, rifle raised. He relaxed slightly upon recognizing James's paint gelding. "Any trouble?" Keegan asked as the rancher dismounted. "None yet. Our visitor's taken a room at the saloon." James handed over a bundle. "Clothes and necessities for Miss Taylor." Abigail insisted on including her hairbrush. "That child's already attached. She's not the only one, I suspect." James gave Keegan a knowing look. "What's your assessment?" "She's hiding from an abusive fiancé, not the law." "Story checks out, given what I observed." Keegan hesitated. "But trouble's following her, sure as rain follows thunder. Trouble finds all of us sooner or later." James stared toward the distant lights of Timber Creek. "Man at the saloon calls himself Smith. Claims to be a distant cousin searching for a runaway relative. Offered a substantial reward for information." "Holloway," Keegan supplied. "According to Miss Taylor. Described her perfectly, down to a scar on her left wrist." James frowned. "What concerns me is how quickly he tracked her here. Someone's talking. Railroad conductor, maybe. A woman traveling alone draws notice. Perhaps." James didn't sound convinced. "I'll head back, maintain appearances. Our Mr. Smith plans to canvass the outlying properties tomorrow. Says his cousin might seek farm work. Smart. She mentioned working on a farm in Minnesota. Keep her here until I send word. Thompson and Jenkins are patrolling the North Ridge. They'll warn if anyone approaches from that direction." After James departed, Keegan returned to his vigil, the bundle clutched in his hands. He should have been resentful of this unexpected complication, this woman whose secrets threatened the ranch's peace. Instead, he found himself oddly protective, not just of the Thorntons, but of Beatrice herself. Dawn was breaking when a quiet voice interrupted his thoughts. "Have you been here all night?" He turned to find Beatrice in the doorway, her hair loose around her shoulders, her dress wrinkled from sleep. Even disheveled, she carried herself with dignity. Someone had to keep watch. He held out the bundle. "From James and Abigail. There's a creek about 50 yards east if you'd like to freshen up." She accepted the package gratefully. "Any news?" "Your Mr. Holloway is in town, offering rewards for information about a runaway relative. He plans to search the surrounding properties today." Fear flashed across her face. "Then I should leave immediately. If he finds me here." "And go where?" Keegan challenged. "With what money? What protection? I've managed alone for months. And he's found you each time." The truth of his words stopped her protest. Shoulders slumping, she nodded. "What do you suggest?" "For now, stay hidden. James and I will handle Holloway." "You can't just handle him. He's dangerous." Keegan's smile held no humor. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is the frontier. We define dangerous differently here." Something in his tone, absolute confidence tinged with steel, made her believe him. For the first time in months, Beatrice felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. "I'll be back by noon," he said, retrieving his rifle. "Try not to wander. The ridge offers a clear view of anyone approaching." After he left, Beatrice explored her temporary sanctuary. The creek provided cool, clear water for washing, and Abigail had thoughtfully included soap along with the hairbrush. Clean and somewhat refreshed, wearing the simple blouse and skirt from the bundle, she felt more herself than she had in weeks. Back in the cabin, she took inventory of supplies, organizing them with the efficiency that had once earned her praise as a society hostess. The irony wasn't lost on her. Skills honed for Philadelphia dinner parties now applied to surviving in a Colorado-lined shack. She was heating coffee when movement outside caught her attention. Peering cautiously through the window, she expected to see Keegan returning. Instead, a strange horse approached, ridden by a man whose broad-brimmed hat shadowed his features. Her heart pounded as she recognized the distinctive silhouette. Victor Holloway had found her again. Victor Holloway dismounted with the fluid grace of a man accustomed to tracking prey through difficult terrain. He secured his horse to a nearby pine, then approached the cabin with measured steps, his right hand resting casually near the holstered revolver at his hip. From her vantage point behind the cabin's sole window, Beatrice evaluated her options, each more desperate than the last. The revolver beneath her mattress called to her, but even if she retrieved it, what then? She'd fired a gun exactly twice in her life, both times at stationary targets under her father's supervision. Holloway was known for his marksmanship. Running was equally futile. The open terrain around the cabin offered no cover, and he'd easily overtake her on horseback. As he neared the porch, Beatrice made a quick decision. She slipped through the back window, landing with a soft thud in the tall grass behind the cabin. Crouching low, she edged around the structure, hoping to reach his horse. If she could scare it off, at least he'd be stranded. She barely rounded the corner when a familiar voice called out. Not Holloway's measured drawl, but Keegan's concerned baritone. "Miss Taylor? Are you all right?" Beatrice straightened, relief flooding through her as Keegan approached on foot, leading his horse. She'd mistaken his silhouette for her pursuers. "I thought." She pressed a hand to her racing heart. From the window, I couldn't see clearly. Understanding dawned on his face. "You thought Holloway had found you. Where's your hat?" The question seemed absurd even as she asked it, but it had been his unfamiliar outline that triggered her panic. "Lost it crossing Miller's Creek." Horse spooked at a snake. He glanced at the open window. "Were you planning to escape through there every time you hear a rider approach?" "Only when I think it's a man who wants to drag me back to Philadelphia against my will." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair enough." He secured his horse beside the cabin. "I bring news. Holloway's been asking questions all morning. Claims you stole family heirlooms before disappearing." "That's a lie," she said hotly. "I took nothing but what was mine." "I believe you." He studied her face for a moment. "But he's convincing. Sheriffs agreed to help him search properties within town limits. Then it's only a matter of time before he expands his search to include ranches." James anticipated that. "He's invited Holloway to the main house this afternoon. Said he'd been expecting a housekeeper who never arrived and wondered if she might be the woman Holloway seeks. A clever distraction. More than that. While Holloway's occupied, we'll move you somewhere he won't think to look." Keegan hesitated. "It requires your trust, Miss Taylor." "I believe I've already placed my safety in your hands, Mr. Turner. This is different. The safest place for you now is in plain sight, as my wife." Beatrice stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Your wife?" "A temporary arrangement," he clarified quickly. "My cabin sits on Thornton land, but separate from the main ranch. Holloway's looking for a single woman, not a newlywed ranch foreman's wife." The logic was sound, but the implications flustered her. "Surely there's another solution. None that guarantees your safety, while keeping you close enough for us to protect." His expression was earnest. "I give you my word as a gentleman. Your honor will remain intact." The situation would be almost comical if it weren't so desperate, fleeing an unwanted engagement only to find herself in a false marriage. Yet the alternative was continued flight with Holloway always one step behind. "Very well," she agreed finally. "How do we proceed?" "We'll wait until dusk, then ride to my cabin. James will ensure Holloway remains occupied until morning." He handed her a simple gold band. "This belonged to my mother. Wear it when we reach town." The ring felt impossibly heavy in her palm. "Your mother won't mind?" "She passed many years ago. I think she'd approve of its use to protect someone in need." His gaze softened. "It's yours to wear until we resolve this situation." As darkness fell, they prepared to leave. Beatrice donned a shawl from the bundle Abigail had sent, pulling it over her hair as additional disguise. Keegan checked his revolver before holstering it. "Stay close to me," he instructed as he helped her mount behind him. "If we encounter anyone, let me do the talking." They rode in silence through the gathering dusk, following game trails rather than established paths. Beatrice's arms encircled Keegan's waist, her cheek resting against his back as exhaustion began to overtake her. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and Keegan's solid presence lulled her into a state between wakefulness and sleep. She roused when the horse slowed, lifting her head to see a small cabin nestled among pine trees. Smoke curled from the chimney, and warm light spilled from the windows. "Someone's here," she whispered, alarmed. "Mrs. Patterson," Keegan explained. James asked her to prepare the cabin. "She's the only one besides him who knows the truth." The landlady greeted them at the door, her practical nature evident in her brisk efficiency. "Got everything ready for you, dears. Stew's on the stove, beds made up fresh. She winked at Beatrice. Told folks in town I was helping Keegan prepare for his bride's arrival. Not a soul questioned it. What with him fixing up this place these past months? Beatrice glanced at Keegan, who suddenly found the floorboards fascinating. You've been renovating? Just making improvements, he muttered. Place needed work. Mrs. Patterson snorted. Been adding a second bedroom, proper kitchen cabinets, and a front porch since spring. Everyone's been wondering who caught his eye. After the landlady departed, promising to spread word of the newlyweds, wanting privacy, Beatrice explored the cabin. It was modest but meticulously crafted, with thoughtful touches throughout. A rocking chair by the fireplace, shelves lined with books, curtains framing the windows. The second bedroom stood unfinished, lumber stacked neatly inside. You've created a lovely home, she said, genuinely impressed. Keegan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Been working on it when time allows. Plan to have it finished by winter. For what purpose, if I may ask? Were you truly expecting to fill it with a family? He busied himself stoking the fire. A man plans for possibilities, not certainties. The diplomatic answer revealed little, but the care evident in every corner of the cabin spoke volumes about its owner. Keegan Turner wasn't just a skilled ranch foreman. He was a man building for a future he hoped would include companionship. They shared Mrs. Patterson's stew in comfortable silence. Afterward, Keegan insisted Beatrice take the bedroom while he made do with a bedroll near the fire. Too exhausted to argue, she accepted the arrangement, falling asleep almost instantly in the first real bed she'd occupied in weeks. Morning brought fresh anxiety. Today Holloway would learn that his quarry had eluded him at the Thornton ranch, which meant his search would intensify. Beatrice's temporary respite felt increasingly fragile. Keegan had already left when she awoke, a note on the table explaining he'd gone to check on the situation in town and would return by noon. She used his absence to acquaint herself with the cabin, taking inventory of supplies and familiarizing herself with the layout, habits formed during months on the run. In the bedroom, she discovered a small desk containing ranch accounts, correspondence, and a leather-bound journal. Though tempted by curiosity, she respected his privacy. What did intrigue her was a map pinned above the desk, marking the Thornton property and surrounding lands, with a particular area circled in red ink. She was studying it when the cabin door opened. Expecting Keegan, she instead found herself face-to-face with Victor Holloway. "Miss Montgomery," he said, tipping his hat as if they'd met at a social gathering rather than after a months-long pursuit. "What a pleasure to finally catch up with you." Beatrice forced herself to stand tall, though her knees threatened to buckle. "How did you find me?" Small towns breed loose lips. Mrs. Patterson is quite proud of facilitating young Turner's sudden marriage. His smile never reached his eyes. Imagine my surprise when her description of the bride matched you perfectly. I'm no longer Beatrice Montgomery. That woman no longer exists. Mr. Montgomery disagrees. Holloway stepped further into the cabin, closing the door behind him. He's paid handsomely for your return, and I intend to deliver. I won't go back. Her hand inched toward a nearby kitchen knife. Holloway noticed the movement. Please don't make this difficult. I'd prefer not to damage Charles's property. I am not property. The words exploded from her with unexpected force. I am a human being who chooses freedom over a life of abuse. Noble sentiments, but ultimately irrelevant. We leave today. He withdrew papers from his coat. I've booked passage east. Your husband need never know you didn't simply abandon him. Frontiersmen expect such disappointments. The casual cruelty of his plan ignited something in Beatrice. Not just fear, but fury. This man would not only return her to a monster, but would leave Keegan believing she'd used and deserted him. If you think I'll cooperate, you're sorely mistaken. Holloway sighed. Cooperation is optional. Compliance is not. He reached inside his jacket, producing a small pistol. Now, gather whatever belongings you require. Our train departs at 4. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted his instructions. Holloway moved to the window, cursing under his breath at the sight of Keegan returning. He turned back to Beatrice, weapon raised. Not a word, he warned. Play your part, Mrs. Turner, or your husband won't live to see sunset. The door opened, and Keegan entered, freezing momentarily at the unexpected tableau before him. His eyes moved from Holloway's gun to Beatrice's frightened face. understanding the situation immediately. "Mr. Smith," he said carefully, "this is an unexpected visit." "Turner." Holloway nodded. "I was just explaining to your wife that her presence is required back east on urgent family business." Keegan stepped further into the room, deliberately casual. "Strange. My wife mentioned no family obligations. They're rather insistent obligations." Holloway kept the gun trained on Beatrice. "In fact, we'll be departing immediately." "I'm afraid that's impossible." Keegan moved incrementally closer. "You see, no man takes another man's wife in Colorado without facing consequences." "She was never your wife, Turner." "This charade fools no one." "Perhaps not, but she is under my protection." Keegan's voice hardened. "Lower your weapon, Holloway. Whatever Montgomery's paying isn't worth dying for." The standoff stretched taut as wire, neither man willing to yield. Beatrice saw Keegan's hand drift toward his holster and knew with terrible certainty that Holloway would fire first. "Stop," she cried. "Both of you, please." "I'll go." She directed her words to Holloway. "I'll return to Philadelphia voluntarily, but only if you leave now, without harming anyone." "Beatrice, no," Keegan protested. "It's my choice," she insisted, though her heart shattered at the thought of returning to Charles. "I won't have blood shed because of me." Holloway smiled thinly. "Wise decision, Miss Montgomery. Shall we?" As he gestured toward the door, his attention momentarily divided. Keegan lunged forward. The cabin exploded with the report of Holloway's pistol, the bullet splintering wood as Keegan tackled him. Both men crashed to the floor, grappling for control of the weapon. Beatrice seized the kitchen knife, searching for an opening to help, but the men's struggle gave her no clear target. When a second shot rang out, her heart stopped, until Holloway slumped, blood spreading across his shirt. Keegan rose shakily, the smoking pistol in his hand. "Are you hurt?" Beatrice rushed to him, hands frantically checking for wounds. "Grazed my arm. Nothing serious." He winced as she touched his torn sleeve. "Are you all right?" "I was going to leave with him," she confessed, tears finally breaking free. "To keep you safe." Keegan's free hand cupped her cheek. "And I would have followed, wherever he took you." The simple declaration stunned her into silence. Before she could respond, the cabin door burst open as James Thornton and two ranch hands arrived, weapons drawn. "We heard shots," James explained, taking in the scene quickly. "Holloway." Keegan nodded toward the fallen man. "He won't trouble anyone again." While the hands dealt with Holloway's body, James examined Keegan's wound. "Sheriff will want statements, but given the circumstances, I don't foresee complications. Man drew on you in your own home." "What about Charles Montgomery?" Beatrice asked. "He'll send others when Holloway doesn't return." "Perhaps," James acknowledged. "But by then, we'll be better prepared." The "we" wasn't lost on Beatrice. These people, virtual strangers days ago, now stood firmly as her protectors, her allies. The realization was overwhelming. "I should leave," she said weakly. "As long as I stay, I bring danger to your door." James and Keegan exchanged glances. "Miss Taylor," the rancher said gently, "sometimes the family we choose proves stronger than the one we're born to. You're welcome at Thornton Ranch for as long as you wish to stay. Besides," Keegan added, his eyes never leaving hers, "you haven't finished interviewing for that housekeeper position." Despite everything, Beatrice found herself smiling. "I believe your daughter already made that decision, Mr. Thornton." "Abigail has excellent judgment," James agreed with a wink. "Now, let's get Keegan's arm tended to before he bleeds on my clean floorboards." 3 weeks later, Beatrice stood on the porch of the main ranch house, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and purple. The inquiry into Holloway's death had concluded quickly, the sheriff ruling it justifiable self-defense. No word had come from Philadelphia, though Beatrice maintained a vigilant awareness that Charles Montgomery was not a man to admit defeat easily. She'd moved into the housekeeper's quarters adjoining the kitchen, transforming them into a comfortable sanctuary while fulfilling her duties with unexpected satisfaction. Abigail flourished under her guidance, eagerly absorbing lessons in cooking, household management, and literature from Beatrice's extensive reading. James, too, seemed to breathe easier with a competent woman overseeing his home. The shadows of grief that had haunted him gradually receded as routine and comfort returned to the Thornton household. He treated Beatrice with unfailing respect, never once alluding to the charade of marriage she and Keegan had briefly maintained. As for Keegan himself, their interactions had grown increasingly complex. The forced intimacy of their temporary arrangement had created a foundation of trust neither had anticipated. Though she'd moved to the main house after Holloway's death, Keegan visited regularly, ostensibly to consult with James, but inevitably finding reasons to linger when Beatrice was present. They developed a comfortable rapport, sharing books and conversations on the porch after supper. He'd begun teaching her to ride properly, lessons that often extended into leisurely explorations of the ranch's most scenic vistas. If his hands occasionally lingered when helping her mount or dismount, neither mentioned it. The approaching sound of hoofbeats interrupted her reverie. Keegan appeared, his tall frame silhouetted against the sunset as he rode toward the house. He dismounted with easy grace, securing his horse before climbing the porch steps to join her. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, removing his hat. "It is." She smiled, noting the fresh haircut and clean-shaven jaw that suggested he'd made a special effort with his appearance. "You missed supper." Abigail was disappointed. "Had business in town." He produced an envelope from his pocket. "This came for you." Beatrice accepted it with trepidation, recognizing the elegant script immediately. "From Philadelphia. Want privacy to read it?" No. She needed his steady presence for whatever news the letter contained. Breaking the seal, she unfolded heavy stationery emblazoned with the Montgomery banking crest. As she read, her expression shifted from apprehension to disbelief. "Charles is engaged," she said finally, "to Emmeline Cartwright. They're to be married in December. Is that good news?" Emmeline's father owns the largest shipping company on the eastern seaboard. The merger of their families creates a financial empire. She looked up at Keegan. "Charles values power above all else, even his wounded pride. So he's no longer pursuing you." "It appears not." She refolded the letter with trembling hands. "I'm free." Keegan's smile was genuine but restrained. "What will you do now?" The question caught her off guard. "Do? With your freedom secured, you could go anywhere. New York, San Francisco, even Europe." He kept his tone casual, though his eyes betrayed deeper emotion. "A woman of your education and refinement has options beyond housekeeping in a frontier town." Beatrice studied him, suddenly understanding his reserve. "Are you suggesting I leave, Mr. Turner?" "I'm suggesting you now have choices that aren't driven by necessity." "And if my choice is to stay?" The hope that flared in his eyes made her heart quicken. "Then I'd be honored to continue our riding lessons. Perhaps expand them to include proper shooting instruction, given your demonstrated need for self-defense skills." "Just riding and shooting lessons?" she pressed, emboldened by the certainty that she no longer wanted to flee, from danger or from the feelings developing between them. Keegan stepped closer. "Beatrice." Her name on his lips sent warmth cascading through her. "I'm a simple man with modest prospects. I can offer honest work, a home built by my own hands, and the promise that you'll never again fear the man who shares your life." He paused, gathering courage. "If that holds any appeal, I'd like to court you properly." "Court me? Not marry me immediately," she teased, referencing their earlier ruse. His answering smile was both sheepish and charming. "I thought we might try things in the conventional order this time." "Conventional has its merits." She moved closer, close enough to detect the scent of soap and pine that she'd come to associate with him. "Though I believe we've already established certain compatibilities." "Is that a yes?" "It's an acknowledgement that my choice was made long before this letter arrived." She reached up, her palm resting against his cheek. "I choose to stay, Keegan, not out of necessity, but desire." His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded with equal fervor, his arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as the kiss deepened. Neither noticed the front door opening until Abigail's delighted voice interrupted them. "I knew it. Pa, come quick. Keegan's kissing Miss Taylor." They separated reluctantly, Beatrice flushing and Keegan running a hand through his hair as James appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "About time," he remarked dryly. "Abigail's been plotting this since the day you arrived." The girl beamed. "Does this mean Miss Taylor will be staying forever?" Keegan looked to Beatrice, the question evident in his eyes. With absolute certainty, she nodded. "Yes, Abigail," she answered, her gaze never leaving Keegan's. "I believe it does." 1 year later, The Timber Creek train station bustled with the same activity that had marked Beatrice's arrival. This time, however, she stood on the platform not as a frightened fugitive, but as Mrs. Keegan Turner, respected member of the community and mistress of her own home. Beside her, Keegan checked his pocket watch. Train's running late. Typical. Patience, husband. She squeezed his arm affectionately. After all these months of correspondence, another hour won't matter. They were awaiting the arrival of Elizabeth Turner, Keegan's sister, who was traveling from Chicago with her 2 children to visit the brother she hadn't seen in 8 years. The reunion had been Beatrice's initiative, part of her determination to create the family connections both she and Keegan had lacked. Abigail paced impatiently nearby, eager to meet the cousins she'd been exchanging letters with since the wedding. At 13, she blossomed under Beatrice's guidance, growing into a confident young woman who divided her time between the main ranch house and the Turners' expanded cabin. James joined them, having closed the general store he'd opened in town after deciding ranch management alone couldn't occupy his newfound energy. The past year had transformed him as much as it had Beatrice, grief giving way to purpose, isolation to community engagement. As the train finally appeared in the distance, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From Philadelphia society to Colorado ranching country, from desperate flight to grounded belonging. The gold band on her finger, no longer a pretense but a promise fulfilled, caught the afternoon sun. Nervous? Keegan asked, noting her thoughtful expression. Grateful, she corrected. For second chances and chosen families. He pressed a kiss to her temple, the gesture both protective and reverent. For a woman who came seeking shelter, you've built quite a home here. We've built it together, she reminded him. Though I still maintain Abigail deserves credit for the initial architecture. Nearby, the girl in question overheard and grinned. I told Pa I had excellent judgment the day I chose you from that train station crowd. She sidled up to Beatrice, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Though I was looking for a mother for me, not a wife for Keegan. You got both in the bargain, James chuckled, joining the conversation. And I got my house put to rights and my daughter properly educated. I'd call that a successful selection. The train pulled into the station with a screech of brakes and billowing steam. As passengers began disembarking, Beatrice felt Keegan tense with anticipation beside her. When a woman with his same brown hair and determined chin appeared, leading 2 children down the steps, his face transformed with joy. Lizzie, he called, striding forward to embrace his sister. Watching the reunion unfold, Beatrice marveled at how completely her life had changed from that first afternoon on this very platform. She had arrived alone, hunted, her future uncertain. Now she stood surrounded by family, some by blood, some by choice, all by love. Abigail slipped her hand into Beatrice's. Are you happy, truly happy, being here instead of in a big city with fancy parties? Beatrice looked down at the girl who had chosen her with such conviction, then to her husband welcoming his family home, and finally to James, whose trust had given her sanctuary when she needed it most. Happier than I ever imagined possible, she answered truthfully. Some journeys take us exactly where we need to be, even when the destination wasn't what we planned. As Keegan returned, leading his sister toward them with proud introductions already beginning, Beatrice stepped forward to welcome the newest additions to their ever-expanding family. The platform that had once represented her desperate search for safety now served as the foundation for a future built on choice rather than circumstance, the most precious freedom of all.